Ladies and gentlemen, hello. It is September 15th, 2015, and I'm going to talk to you today about love. One of my girls was over yesterday, and we were talking about loving everyone. And I say, I love those who are deserving of love. And this brought something up for her, and so we talked about it. I love those who for their actions. I judge people for their actions, and this is counter to what a lot of indoctrination that happens earlier in life, especially with religion and feel-good social etiquettes. I judge people for their actions, and I love them for their actions, and I hate them for their actions. And it's like the philosophy of a lot of saints and teachers: love the person, not the actions. And so it came down to, I think we're all equal on a deeply spiritual, on a soul level, on an energetic level. I don't think the child is any less or more than the president, is less or more than the murderer or the rapist, is less or more than the rock. Because let me, just for a brief, to catch up to speed, I was raised Roman Catholic, confirmed in the church, read the Bible growing up. I went through a period in college that I kind of denounced religion and spirituality. That was right about the time I found alcohol, and for a year or two I just kind of wandered the world thinking that I was the greatest. And slowly through life experiences I started realizing there were things that I just didn't understand, but they were so consistent that there was I believed there was some underlying principle governing these recurring events. And so I was willing to accept that maybe there was something divine beyond my understanding. And then I found fasting and yoga and started studying other religions, and so now I pick and choose what I like, what resonates with me, and I leave the rest. And so one of the philosophies that I came to, and this is actually a book that my sister got me, and I would say that around 90% of my spiritual beliefs come from this book. It's Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsch. And I'm not going to read you any quotes from it. It's a thick book, a fun read, but it's still kind of dense. And one of the philosophies that are just like paramount to how I regard spirituality is this idea of a monotheistic divine entity. And I'm a scientist, so I go with, I'm a research scientist from environmental studies, and I consider myself logical and rational, and the concept of a supreme deity only makes sense to me if it was everywhere. If it was everywhere and always. If there was a time and or a space in the universe that the divine was not, then it was something short of the ultimate God. It was a demigod. And so if we accept, okay, so if there is a God, then he, she, it must be everywhere and anywhere, always. And that's the prerequisite to being the supreme God. Well, if that such an entity exists, or such a consciousness, or whatever it is to be called, then everywhere, the rock, the tree, the human, the murderer, the yoga mat, the cow, everything embodies that divine, like a raindrop to the ocean. On that level, I love everything. And so the murderer or the rapist or the person that does me wrong, yeah, I love their soul, whatever. That's great. I love a rock. So the love of creation is not reserved for people in my mind. And there are beliefs, like I said, I was raised Catholic, that only people embody a soul. And that would, to me, suggest that the soul is somewhere, but there are places that the soul is not. And what is this difference between soul and God? the soul is timeless. The soul is never dies. And if it does die, then it's not a God. It's not part of God. God doesn't die. And if it is timeless, then there's no difference between God and the soul. What could be immortal and not be God? But then we're saying that the soul is somewhere and not other places. So then God is not in these other places, and so it falls short of the prerequisite requirement for a supreme God. And so the soul being everywhere, I love the soul. The intellect not being everywhere, and the intellect being something different than a soul. I have an intellect, and I have the ability to judge other people's intellects, and I judge people for their actions. If they are worthy of my love, it's from their actions. Otherwise, I'm not saying hate people, but I can choose not to love people. And there's an idea that there's an afterlife, and you'll be punished if you don't love unconditionally. Well, that's a fear-based judgment. If I'm changing my actions for fear that I'll be punished, well, I think most people would agree, unless your life is being threatened, but fear of some intellectual or emotional consequence of an action, that's probably not a safe environment to be making decisions. And then on the other side, there's this idea of like my karma. Like if I don't love unconditionally, I'll carry this karma with me. And again, that's a fear-based or an obligatory. So on the one end, you have making decisions out of fear of consequences, and on the other end, you have making decisions out of some prior obligation. And decisions made out of a sense of obligation are not. We'll grow to resent those decisions, especially if things don't go exactly as we wanted, and we'll say to ourselves, well, I felt obliged to do this, and then the outcome wasn't what I wanted, therefore I feel helpless or frustrated or whatever. And so decisions out of obligation, decisions out of fear, no good. And so I have it within my power as a human to judge other people's actions and their intellects. And if I were to cross the bridge and start judging people's souls, then I start becoming self-righteous, and that's no good either. That's just for your actions, for your merit. And the idea, like, I don't think that this is going definitely into my opinion if it hasn't already. I don't think that the rapist or the murderer should be put to death. I think that it doesn't solve the problem. And I think it presents society with an opportunity to study the psychology of such crazy people. And I'm not big on taxes, but by whatever means that we're able to organize a kind of prison and reform system, I think that psychology, hypnosis, nutrition, we could strap a guy down or the girl and give them massage to try to resolve issues, hypnotherapy. There's just so many possibilities to learn, because that condition, this is coming from a philosopher named Stefan Molyneux. You can look him up on YouTube. That a lot of the world's woes and violence is a result of how we were raised as children. And so you hit a child, the child grows to learn that love means hitting, and so then when the child's an adult, they hit, and that's how they express their love. And it was interesting, another friend of mine was over reading Shadows on the Path, actually, which I did a vlog the other day about Shadows on the Path. And she was reading this passage, I forget exactly, but it was basically when the child is in sorrow or woe, and then they're showered with love by the family, that just reinforces that behavior pattern. And it's all of life, all of the social matrix is Pavlovian conditioning, which if you ever watch The Dog Whisperer, Cesar Millan, Pavlovian conditioning, you reward good behavior and you punish or retract affection for undesired behavior. And the point of Shadows on the Path was that our parents selectively gave us love based on our actions, and so those actions that didn't get the love we need as children, we buried those. Maybe I spontaneously wanted to be a dancer or something, and parents didn't love me for that. I mean, this isn't true in my case, but parents didn't love me for this, and so I tucked away my desire to be a dancer, and then later in life I have this shadow behind me of I want to be a dancer, but I've repressed it. And so given that we remove spanking from parenting, remove yelling and punitive coercion, there still may be brain defects. There may be cancers, there may be abnormalities, mutations that children grow and they're violent, and it's not because they were raised violently. And this would be a rare exception, but I still don't believe that those people should be put to death if they do some extraordinarily heinous crime. I think that's a test subject. Let's study peaceful resolution. Let's try to figure out their mind and their brain and their nutrition and see if we can't resolve this. And I would be willing to pay some dollars every year for that kind of research and rehabilitation, as opposed to the current prison system, which just, breeds more criminals. So that's where I'm coming from. I think this idea of love is, it gets watered down and it loses its meaning when we just think or believe out of fear or guilt that I should love everyone and everything, regardless, unconditionally. Yeah, I love their soul to whatever extent I can see their soul, but the soul is everywhere. And so I could walk around saying, I love water, I love rock, I love lamp. And the word love just kind of loses its meaning. I love people based on their actions, their loyalty, their contribution, their self-love. And if they're not worthy of my love, then it's nothing, because I don't have room in my life for hate. It's too... momentarily hate crosses my mind, and then I just let it go, because it's... And I somewhat do the same thing with love, because the attachment to that feeling can be a hindrance also. So I hope that's helpful. I highly recommend looking into the book Conversations with God, and the other things I talked about, Cesar Millan and Stefan Molyneux. If you're interested, I'll provide the links for that. And, well, catch up with you next time. Ninth Lemio.